It's time for To The Last Drop podcast with Liam Del Carme and Brenden Nel.
It's a week away from the World Cup, and it's been a wonderful week for Springbok fans. We're back. This is To The Last Drop. I'm Brenden Nel, and I'm with Liam Del Carme. Liam, I don't think we could, in our wildest dreams, have expected what happened at Twickenham on Friday night.
No, it went for better than expected. I mean, it was one of those where it was difficult to make a prediction when you looked at the two lineups, because the Springboks went with a lot of experience up front. The All Blacks seem to have a bit more experience in their back line, a couple of absentees in their pack. And we know, of course, how dangerous they can be with, even if they don't get 50% of the ball, they can still, make away and cut teams to shreds. So it was difficult to come to a point where you conclusively will say, before that game that, Team X will win it. But the Springboks left nobody in doubt. After 10 minutes, I think we were sort of all in agreement. This game can only go one way.
Now, I mean, there's been a lot of takes on that box. I mean, when a box side's like that, they're in superb form. They dominant. I don't think there's any team on the planet that could have probably touched them on Friday night, the way they were playing. And I think the one thing, they obviously learned from what happened in Auckland. They went back. They targeted the breakdown where they got beaten, and they made sure they didn't have the slow start they had in Auckland. Came out firing and probably could have been more up. I mean, they were over the line twice, tackled out twice in that first 20 minutes. It's a hell of a dominant 20 minutes that they had.
And let's be fair, I think the All Blacks defended exceptionally in that period. Obviously, eventually, the mistakes came and the penalty count went up, and there were cracks in the dam wall, and obviously, eventually, it broke. But yeah, it was certainly a compelling performance especially from the South African pack, which incidentally is also by my calculation, certainly the most experienced starting pack they've ever assembled. But increasingly, they have found other ways. Once that pressure is applied to apply finishing touches, and that has been a very encouraging element to their play. There's no doubt whatsoever that Springbok fans should be quite enthused by what they saw last week.
No, I mean, to me, I don't think it really matters to the Springbok management whether you lay down a marker before the tournament or you make other teams stick up and notice. They're definitely not going to go into the tournament now unnoticed. They will pretty much be almost one of the favourites for the tournament. And I suppose they need to wear that tag. And I think that's something South African teams have struggled with over the years, is wearing a favourites tag. We like to be backs against the wall, but maybe this team can just change that for us.
Yeah, and so much for going to Corsica and hide there for a week or so before the tournament and go in under the radar. It was a statement of intent last week. So, of course, they will now apply sort of finishing touches there and go into this tournament as, you would have to say, one of the firm favourites.
Definitely.
It's one of those topics we probably will discuss later in the show. We were talking about how open this World Cup is not so long ago, where 6-7 teams potentially could win the thing. But now I think that number has shrunk.
No, exactly. And I think the other thing that was very apparent, and I know our New Zealand friends won't like this. I mean, they're still reading and trying to find excuses for what happened. Fair enough. We would be the same if it happened to the Springboks.
Yeah.
Is that New Zealand struggles, well, at least this New Zealand team struggles when teams put a pressure game on them, cut off their oxygen, and don't allow them to get those offloads away, and put real pressure on them with a rush defense. We've seen it when they played Ireland. We saw it in a manner when they played England at Twickenham last year, when England came back to draw that game, and France, the couple of times they played them as well. I mean, we've seen there are cracks in this All Black armour. They still have a very, very good side, we've got to say that. But if you get the game plan right against them, you can really, like the Boks did, put them under real pressure.
I don't think, especially when you look at their backline, that they have the firepower to play through teams. They still have to primarily play around them. And if a rush defense puts the heat on them, denies them space, then that's going to be a very difficult thing to do. And also, you have to say it's a very well organized Springbok defense. And of course, last week without Willie Leroux, we have to add.
Yes.
It's a man that often gets kudos for the way he organizes people. He wasn't even there. So it's going to be, there's a few problems for New Zealand that they have to solve. I'm not suggesting for one moment they can't solve it. We saw the ability to bounce back at Ellis Park last year, albeit on the back of a Springbok team that was much changed. But it was clear they were a better side at Ellis Park than they were in Nelspruit, and they were certainly up for the fight. So I do expect them to be better, but whether they would have made all those improvements come quarterfinals time, I'm not so sure.
I'm also not so sure. I expect a bit of a backlash. There'll be knowing New Zealand like we do, there'll be a lot of public pressure on them these next couple of weeks, and they'll be expected to bounce back, and it's just going to make that opening game against France even more epic. The other thing with the All Blacks that I picked up as well, which I thought worth mentioning, is against Ireland they went down to 14 men, and against the Boks they went down to 13 men, and they were quite heavily penalised in this game at Twickenham. Are refs becoming wise to them? They're certainly not giving them the leeway that we've had in past New Zealand teams, and maybe that's just evening up matters as well. I know there's a lot of complaints, and we're going to get to those complaints now about the refs from New Zealand. But the discipline is certainly a thing that this New Zealand team has to improve on.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the refs have made that decision, or arrived at a point where they have sort of wisened up to some of those tricks. What I will say is that given the performance and given the pressure the Springboks put them under, at some point those penalties had to come. I think it took a while for the ref to reach for his pocket.
Let's listen quickly this is former Scotland coach Matt Williams, who had quite an issue on it on the Off the Ball podcast.
But it does concern you, especially when you look at, the way the South Africans are just abusing the bench at the moment. That was supposedly, the bench came in, just so your listeners, that was all for safety reasons, so that people didn't come on the positions they weren't trained for, so we didn't have injuries. We weren't putting back rowers in the front row. Everything was done for a reason. That takes 7 off the bench. Like 7 forwards. Really? Seriously? And World Rugby's just got to act on this. And all the way you fix it is you say you must have 3 recognised backs on your bench, and that stops it. But right now, South Africa just, changed the whole team, the whole pack. Now, if they do that and we're not up to scratch, we've got some players, they'll be found out. And so it's obvious, South Africa's tactics are obvious now, what they're going to do. And we have to be ready for it.
You're with Liam Del Carme and Brenden Nel on the To The Last Drop podcast.
It's strange because the timing is strange, because it's the same thing as what happened after the World Cup final in 2019 with the bomb squad of 6-2, that people suggested changing the substitutes. And it just seems, instead of praising innovation and the risk that comes with the innovation, people are sort of very quick to say, no, you can't do that. And it feels very colonial and very sort of talking down to people that you're not allowed to be innovative.
Yeah, I mean, if you, I know there's also some complaints about the rolling maul. Obviously, the box mauled really well last week. I've also read a few pieces on it that people can tend to focus on the raw power, of the Springbok forwards, and how that makes a difference. But people forget about things like technique, cohesiveness. I mean, we mentioned earlier how experienced that Springbok pack is.
Yeah, and I mean, the other big take of the week was on the breakdown, where Jeff Wilson, the former All Black, had a very unique take on it. Listen quickly to what he said.
Well, the great thing is for me, Danny, though, we know exactly that was the best that the Springboks can play. That's it. We know that we can play so much better, and there's not another team in this competition coming forward that we can anticipate that will play like that.
Now, to me, Jeff's take is just as interesting, saying the Boks can't play better than that. The All Blacks can play better than that. I'm sure the All Blacks can. We all know they can. but you only play as well as your opposition lets you play. And I think that's the point he's missing. And he's not doing any justice to the way the Springboks play. Yeah, it's a very unfortunate thing. I don't want to, we don't have to dwell too much. A lot will still probably come out about this. But just the news was rather shocking and, rather unfortunate. And unfortunately, just a downhill spiral for Elton.
Sorry, I had nothing to add there.
That's fine. No, it's fine. Okay, when you come back, we'll be speaking to our surprise guest.
You're with Brenden Nel and Liam Delcom on the To The Last Drop podcast.
We're back, and our surprise guest is somebody who knows pretty much what goes on in the World Cup. He's a man who's won a World Cup himself and knows quite well the preparations for the box. Schalk Brits, welcome, Schalk. Thanks for joining us.
Today I'm sitting here on the floor trying to manage my back as I've been pushed into a sardine tin for 20 years of my life. All good.
Schalk, I'm going into this World Cup now. It must bring back a lot of memories. Does it still itch to be there, or is I suppose the back injury making you quite happy you're not there?
Look, I would say, Brenden, that itch is still there. It is. I can't believe how quickly 4 years have gone. And of course, it brings back memories of the boys getting the capping, the sent off. And within South Africa, we've got such a passionate public support, and it's quite amazing the way the South Africans get behind South Africa. And it was the performance against Wales and New Zealand was pretty spectacular, I guess. And so from our personal perspective, it's just great seeing the boys performing. I think it's actually a better squad than in 2019, a lot more maturity in the squad. We've got some injuries that we didn't have in 2019, but saying that is the boys are looking good.
Have you picked up sort of similarities between what happened in 2019 and now? I'm just thinking of the team now is in Corsica, busy preparing there, and we've already heard some of the players saying how hot and humid it is there. And I recall before the Japan World Cup, you guys had that one game in Saitama against Japan, and the object of the exercise there was to acclimatize, get used to playing in those conditions, just from a physiological point of view, but then also to master the wet ball. Can we draw parallels there?
Not at all. Eating the Japanese food is quite different to the French cuisine, I would say. You get stuck into some croissants. But I must say, and there's a lot more familiarities in France than there would be in Japan. Just the culture is totally different. But going there, I think it's a time for the team to bond. It's time to work on final prep for the World Cup. And I think it's a good way of getting the players sort of out of the environment and making sure that everything is set in their own ways. The one problem was harder if you train, and it's fantastic to train in France, but same with Japan, there is a lot of cameras around that can record training sessions, particular moves. Now you can run things that nobody would see. I don't think they'll send people to Corsica to videotape training sessions. And from a team perspective, it's great just to get your mind off the game, although there will be a lot of focus going into this World Cup on rugby, of course. But to do certain things that you couldn't do and that you try to hide from the opposition and from other coaches and run specific plays. Like you can see, Rassie and Jacques was quite creative in the mauling this weekend against New Zealand. And I think there would be some rabbits out of the hat coming into being in the World Cup.
One of the things Jacques said after the game was, obviously, one of the things they have to work on, there's lots of positives from the All Black game, but one of the things they have to work on, the fact that they were over the line twice and tackled out twice in that opening 20 minutes, and their finishing perhaps wasn't on the standard that they want. And in the World Cup, obviously, you get less chances. So if a coach says that, and I think that's always the thing that fascinates me, does it just mean repeat, rinse and repeat the whole time? Or how do you in a training session work on finishing, if I can put it that way? So.
I think that's just nitpicking, actually, Brendan. That's just saying something. I think after a performance like that against New Zealand, giving the biggest whooping ever, I think from a strategic perspective, having a 7-1 split was genius, although the general public is not South African public, but worldwide, they complaining about it. They are throwing their toys out of their cots about how you can do that. But it's a massive risk to take. If we had 2 injuries in the back or 3 injuries in the back line, we would have been properly stuffed. But because it counted in our favor, and now people are moaning about the 7-1 splits, and trying to focus on getting the ball down behind the line, yes, there is something to work on, I guess. But saying that is you want, as a team, you want to have as many entries in the 22, and then you look at your conversion rate. And yet, the plays were good. Sometimes I would just say you give credit to New Zealand for having a never-die attitude. From that perspective, they'll look at technical things, different from a mauling and making sure the blockers were in the right position to make sure that the ball carrier can get the ball down. But sometimes you have to take your hat off, even in a performance like that against New Zealand. You say, well done, boys, awesome. But now the question is, can you keep that intensity? It doesn't help you give New Zealand a record whipping before the World Cup. You need your performance in the World Cup.
To your mind, I mean, when you look back to 2019 and in the intervening years, how the game has evolved, do you think the game has made a huge leap forward? I know there's been changes to laws to make the game safer, but whatever those changes have been, I mean, the Boks seem to have coped with them pretty well.
Look, Liam, the South African public wants, and this is, I guess, everyone now that I'm a couch potato, everyone wants the Boks to win every game. They want the Boks to perform every game. And they sometimes do not understand certain selections and certain combinations, I would say. But Rassie and Jacques has always mentioned, we don't really care what happens. The Lions test matches was big. That's every 12 years. And then in between World Cups, they were trying different combinations, making sure those combinations and depth has grown in a squad. People do, if I ask anyone in 2008 who's won the Tri Nations back then, probably 1% can remember that. But ask people who won, for example, the 07 or 2012 or 2015 World Cup, the percentage will increase significantly. And that is, I think, what Rassie and Jacques is focused on, is making sure he's got squad depth, firstly. If a guy like Handra Pollard goes down, and what has happened, if Lloyd goes down, who's in his spot? I know, and certain young players putting their hands up and saying, like Moody, listen, pick me at 13. And oh my goodness, what a revelation at 13. He's just a great rugby player and a great baller. Now you go into the World Cup. The one thing that is, I think, where the biggest variable is, and where it's breaking my mind. Yes, World Rugby is trying to make it safer, but yet certain of the calls is just quite frustrating, I would say, and there's a big focus on player safety, but it's got a massive impact on what happens in a game. I mean, if you take France, when we played France, was it last year, with Peter Steph's red card, they can have a significant impact. And although they've made sure that you can upgrade or downgrade a card that's been given, it still plays a massive part. With one tackle where the runner of the ball has dipped into a tackle, it is just, that is my fear. You can have the best side, best prep, and then 1 millisecond of dipping into a tackle, that will mean the end of your World Cup, because winning a game with 40 men, as you saw this weekend, is extremely hard.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's all our fears at the moment. I mean, we understand what World Rugby is trying to do, but it just seems sometimes common sense is probably not there. And sometimes, I mean, Liam and I chatted last week about the Owen Farrell thing. And it's hard to explain that initial decision when a guy like Oxenchair gets 3 weeks for an accidental head touch. Some of these things don't quite make sense to us. And it's struggling. And you can see somebody's World Cup could be over in 4 years of prep down the drain with one incident.
Yeah, for me, Brenden, you have to look at intent, because that's a big part. And you must understand the game is fluent, moves quickly. Things happen extremely quickly. And for me, it's intense. You can see if other players trying to rip another guy's head off, or if he's got reoccurring offences in the past. And then thirdly, you have to, in a game perspective, that can play such a big part in the outcome of a result. And that's unfortunate the way they're going. And then lastly, I would say is the repercussions of an incident. You have to have consistency with decisions. One guy can't get no weeks and the other guy get 6 weeks. And that's things that drive players and coaches, I guess, crazy. And that's a coach killer as well. You've got a player that is phenomenal and he gets, or any player in your squad in 80 minutes and he gets a red card and then he gets banned for the rest of the World Cup and he's prepped for that and there was no intent. There was a dipping of things, and I just want consistency across the board with either reffing, how they approach the game, and secondly, on the fines that they give to players after the incident. So you can't give one player for the same offence, one gets nothing and the other one gets 3 or 4 weeks.
That, of course, brings us back to what we spoke about earlier, and it's squad depth. And you should know a thing or two about squad depth, particularly in the hooking position. The Boks are pretty well fortified in that position, but then there is a guy like Dion Fourie, who is obviously exceptional. He brings such a vast skill set to that team. How do you see him sort of fitting into the overall picture?
Well, firstly, Dion is an unbelievable team player. But I would say at fly-off and at hooker, this is where we would hope we don't get injuries. Because if you look at weaknesses within a squad, we've got ample depth in all positions. I would say outside centre is tricky as well. A guy losing Lukanya is a big loss. A guy like Louis de Jager is a big loss. But if you only take 2 hookers on hopefully it was 7 games, you hope either Bongi or Malcolm won't go down. And although Dion is a great rugby player, hooker is quite a specific position. I think the last time he started a game was in 2018 or 2019 at hooker. Maybe, yeah. That's just where I hope luck goes our way. And you need luck to win a World Cup, that you don't get injuries in such positions. And like in the final when we went for, a 6-2 split, Billy got injured or had a niggle, Malcolm had a niggle, Cheslin had a niggle, and they made it through the final. It was a great win, but nobody knew how close we got to those players going off the pitch. So you do need a bit of luck, and hopefully the coin will, for the first time ever, fall on us 2 World Cups in a row. We don't want to wait another 12 years before we win another one. And in the message that I've seen is although the first World Cup, or 2019, not the first World Cup, but 2019 World Cup, the thing was focused on stronger together from a team perspective and showing that irrelevant of your upbringing, your race, your religion, everything that sort of pulls us apart, that was the viewpoint of how we can get everyone together, showing South Africans that we can all work together and we can succeed. This World Cup with the players, it feels more, it's like we can build a legacy that it's never been done before, and now it can be done. And I think one thing that is amazing from the players' perspective, they've still got the belief. And the way we play is actually focused so much on World Cups. It's not pretty. Well, it's pretty for me, but for the general public, it's not so pretty the way we play. It is a brutal game. We dominate in the forwards. We come hard. We tackle the living crap out of anyone that comes in our channel. And we play to our strength, where in the past it felt like we tried to play this beautiful game of New Zealand or Australia, move the ball around. Yes, now we've got the backs and the players to be exciting, but we still focus on the core strength of our game, and that is kicking well, mauling well, scrumming well, and we pick our bench and our squad in a way that plays to our strength.
Well, I've got to ask you one thing, though. You know a lot of the players in the UK, and I mean, you played there for a long time. What's going on with England?
Brendan, it's weird, right? I mean, so I played with Steve, and he was my captain at Saracens, a phenomenal captain. Wiggy that's involved there with was a great player and a great teammate. So and by all accounts, Steve's mannerism is totally different to Eddie. Eddie is brutal. He is to the point. He can cut with his tongue. And the only thing I can see, because people disagree with me, I think they've got phenomenal talent, but the word belief is very hard to grow in a squad. And that just looks like a team that they can be extremely physical, they can be extremely good, but they're just lacking that belief that is hard to see, right? Because although it is opposition now, it is still, there's a lot of friends of mine still playing in that squad, and they've got coaches that I believe in can get the best out of the players. So I hope, from my perspective, they will turn things around. It's going to be hard, but if there's someone that can do it, I hope Steve does it. And funny enough, I still think England will go through the pools, although they've got an easier draw. Well, everyone's got an easier draw than South Africa and Ireland and Scotland. And actually, I think Australia and New Zealand, Australia and England will meet in the quarterfinals. And I still think, if you think in 2007, that was a crap team. Not a crap team, but they lacked confidence. They got a record loss against South Africa, but yet they made the final. And once again, I think they made the last final, and I hope they come right this World Cup.
The draw certainly favours that, because you spoke earlier about the influence of a red card and how things can change very quickly. So you almost have to assume that they've got a decent chance of making a semi-final. And from there, you could then, card goes against a team that's more fancied, and suddenly they're in the final again, and then anything can happen.
Yeah, weirdly enough, I still think Argentina will win that pool, and then England will come second.
They play each other on the opening weekend, so that will probably determine the pool already quite early.
Yeah, I do think so. Funny enough, I think Wales is the one going into this World Cup that I feel is more vulnerable, although they had a decent result against England. But England wasn't firing at all. And they've got Fiji, and Fiji, just beat England. Fiji has got talent coming out of their ears. And if they've got their tails up, that's a team, if they get confident, they are hard to play against, because you can analyze as much as you like. They can pull you apart. They've got the talent, they've got the players, and now they've got the belief. They beat for the first time a first-tier team just before the World Cup. The first time they beat in England ever at Twickenham. So that's going to be a tough team to play against come World Cup. But one thing that I think on the World Cup is people always look at probably the first 15, but World Cups, you need depth, and that's luckily what we've got. Where I feel Wales, yes, they got a great 15, but if they've got a couple of injuries in certain positions, they're going to struggle.
Who's going to be in the final with the Boks, and who's your dark horse the tournament?
So let's say final-wise, I think we'll win our pool. Ireland will be second. I think France is going to be New Zealand. So there's a lot of things that I think, although I think Scotland's going to push Ireland very hard. So I'm making crazy predictions here. And I think actually Scotland will lose against Tonga. But Ireland will go through with points difference over Scotland, or I think there'll be 1 point difference. Then we'll play New Zealand in the quarters. France will beat Ireland, and then the Irish public will hate me again for this, because I said they're not going to get past the quarterfinal again. And then on the other side of the draw, I think then France will go through. France will make it to the final, and we'll play in the final.
It's going to be a heartbreak. It's going to be a real heartbreak for Scotland, because at the last World Cup, they had that last pool game against Japan, and the winners obviously would go through to the knockouts. And this was also in the wake of the typhoon, and there was a lot of emotion, and Japan just played the game of their life. I mean, it was just incredible. And Scotland happened to be the team they were up against. So you have to feel for the Scots.
Yeah, look, it's just silly. I try to be a guy with a glass half full type of mentality, but the way the pools has been drawn is just ridiculous. I mean, to have the top 4 sides in one side of the draw is just silly. But that's the way it's on, and we can't do anything about it. But so from my side, so if I would say, being a total, if I look at it from a neutral perspective, if New Zealand or South Africa doesn't win the World Cup, I would really hope for France or Ireland, either one of them win the World Cup, just for world rugby growth, that perspective. And then from a dark horse perspective, funny enough, the 2 sides that I love to watch is going to be Fiji and Tonga this year. Tonga with a lot of other professionals that played either for New Zealand or Australia that's in their squad now with the rule change. They're going to be exciting. They struggle on set piece. I don't think they are. They've got just a different way of playing this game, but it's going to be an exciting game. Japan, I think I would love to say the Japanese because I love the culture, I love the people, but they don't have the same momentum going into this World Cup as the previous one. It's not at home. They had a bad run into the World Cup. But it's nice to see Portugal, and I'll probably watch Namibia, but dark horse, I would say Fiji.
Schalk, just remind us the last thing before we go. What are you doing nowadays other than being on the golf course a lot?
So I worked for Remgro for 2 years. So my background's accountancy. That's what I studied. So I was at Remgro for 2 years, going through the private equity, venture capital, corporate finance, and internal audit side. Then I worked for a fund called Southern Road Capital, and all our managers, global managers. But although we raised and placed money from South Africa, I resigned in October because I was just away 3 days of the week and my wife working abroad. So I've been on an extended sabbatical since October, and I'll probably jump into the corporate world or into something else in beginning 2024. I'll be doing some work for SuperSport, and I've been doing some work for SuperSport and corporate engagements, but that's pretty much it. Spending time with the 4 most important investments in my life, and that's my 3 kids and my wife. So after that, it's been phenomenal.
So if you sit down sort of on a Friday night and there's the fire going and you have to open a bottle, what are you most likely to open?
Well, there's not just Friday evening and Friday afternoons. There's my favorite spot to go and visit is John Engelbrecht's Rissenvrede farm down the road, and it's for me just I have not had one bad bottle of Rissenvrede in my life. So if I've got, it's just a phenomenal wine. The atmosphere there or the environment is great. And for me, I'm quite, I didn't grow up in Stellenbosch. I came into school and university, and only then the love for wine started. But Liam, I must say, a Rissenvrede blend is great. But there's, Beierskloof, I started with Beierskloof back in the day, the diesel. It's just a great wine. We're quite fortunate in South Africa. From a wine perspective, you pay £30 for a bottle of average wine in the UK, and then you come to South Africa and you pay the same amount for an unbelievable bottle of wine. So we've got such amazing wine. But you must try Damascene. Jean, what's Jean's surname? Jean is a winemaker. It's on the way to Hermanus, and there's some beautiful wine farms there. Try it. It's great.
You started with Beierskloof. The rest of us started with Tassenberg. So,
well, I wouldn't say. Well, I would. At that time when we started with Tassenberg, it wasn't actually the taste that that attracted me. It was more the price and how quickly I can get slaughtered as a young student.
Yeah.
Nobody's got money when they're a student, or I didn't. So, sometimes you just have to take the quickest and cheapest route to wine heaven, I guess.
Yeah, no, exactly. Listen, Schalk, thanks for your time. It's good chatting to you, and we'll probably bump into you somewhere along the World Cup if you around Supersport and the functions there. But yeah, thanks for sharing your insights with us.
Thanks,
Oh,
Schalk.
no, thank you for your time, and go enjoy a glass of wine.
Definitely going to open the bottle now. So,
Cheers, chaps.
Thanks for listening, and a reminder, you can find all the To The Last Drop podcasts on the Brenden Nel YouTube channel, iono.fm, Spotify, player.fm, Pocket Casts, Google Podcasts, and iTunes, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts.